Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much for joining this FSR online debate. Today, we are going to discuss about the future of the European electricity sector, a particularly relevant topic, especially since the recent market design reform in 2024. So we're going to discuss about the new elements introduced or reinforced. And we are going to have, as usual, an interactive debate with you. So I already encourage you to participate actively in the discussion. You will see that we have a Q&A box under our speaking heads. So please feel free to use it. And in the second part of today's debate, we will collect the most relevant questions and pose them to the panelists. Before we start with introducing the speakers of today's debate, we have a fantastic set of panelists. I will give now the floor to Alberto Potocznik, scientific organizer and co-host of this debate, for introduction about the topic.
Thank you, Daria, and good afternoon to everybody. Yes, indeed, we are going to talk today about the design of the electricity market in Europe, which is undergoing a reform process aimed at supporting the clean energy transition with the aims of delivering security, competitiveness, and affordable energy for all of us. In this new design, a greater role is foreseen for long-term contracting and procurement mechanisms, particularly for renewable generation capacity and flexibility sources. Therefore, this debate will revolve around the implication of such changes on the shaping of the future electricity sector towards the net zero in 2050. I also want to mention that the event is organized on the occasion of the publication of a book of the Loyola de Palacio series of the Florence School of Regulation, companion to the European electricity market designs and public policies for decarbonization, and one of the co-authors is today with us for this debate. So that's all I wanted to say as an introduction today to today's event, and I will give now the screen back to Ilaria for presenting the first speakers.
Many thanks, Alberto. Yes, as I said, we have a fantastic set of speakers and panelists. It is really my pleasure now to start introducing them. You already mentioned the first speaker, who is also a co-author of the book, A Companion to the European Electricity Market, recently published, Guido Cervini, who is also the managing director of DFC Economics. We will start with Guido's presentation, and then we will hear more regarding the policy perspective. We're very happy to have with us today Anna Maria Marchi from the DG ENER of the European Commission, where she's Deputy Head of Unit for Internal Energy Market. And then we will finish the first introductory part of today's debate with Christophe Genskreux, who is the Head of the Electricity Department at ACER, the Agency for the Cooperation of Energy Regulators, based in Ljubljana. So as you can see, really a well-set overview for electricity sector, the future of electricity sector. And without further ado, I give the floor now to Guido for the first presentation.
Thank you, Ilaria, and good afternoon to everyone. Can you hear me properly?
Yes, very well.
Excellent. So I'm going to use the excuse of the presentation of the book to put forward some reflections on what is happening to the European electricity sector. And I hope to find sort of an original way to put forward my reflections. And the original way is starting from the past. I've realized that the story of the electricity sector in Europe can be split in 3 stages. And what I've realized is that probably not many of us were lucky enough to experience the 3 stages, because the first one ended in 1996. And I realize now that it is not likely that many of us, or that all of us, were working at that time. I am one of those, so I had a taste of the three different regulatory model, or I would say organizational models of the industry. Well, the first one, which I placed between the 1950s, after the Second World War, and 1996, can be characterized as vertically and horizontally integrated monopolies, basically in all European countries, and with public ownership. Why was that model chosen? Well, the reasons that we recall are, first of all, financial issues. The sectors had to be developed, and there was a need for finding the necessary financial resources. And at that time, public ownership and monopoly was seen as the best way to procure the financial resources. Other reasons, technology. It was the time of the first development of nuclear electricity, which was definitely considered as something that the governments should take care of. And another technological reason is probably that they were living a fully analog environment, where also, I mean, imagining hardly settlement of electricity transactions could have been impossible. Then social justice, the topic of universal service availability was eminent at the time. And finally, purely ideological reasons. At that time, there was the idea that the state was supposed to play an active role in the economy, and that could be useful. Well, things change in the second stage. Between 1996, I put the second stage from the first start. I make it start with the first energy package, and I make it finish in 2024. So the pillars of this stage, which probably we are all very familiar with, is first of all, liberalization of the activities that could be liberalized, generation and retail, privatization and regulation of the companies, and unbundling. Reasons, let me start from ideology this time. The idea was that markets would be more efficient than governments in not only running enterprises as such, but especially in selecting investments. There were troubles in public budgets, and at the same time, the private financial sector was booming. And technology. Technology made the things easier, actually, because the generation technology that was in fashion was combined cycle natural gas turbines, which came as modular items that could be easily bought and used and managed by anyone. And also digital technologies would make it possible to implement complex organizational arrangements more easily. Let me just point out that no one ever questioned that the traditional monopolists were not efficient in dispatch, i.e. in using the investments that they had done. That was not on the table. Actually, the move to the market was seen, in a sense, in the move to the market, the problem of dispatch, and therefore all the short-term market apparatus that we created, was seen as an evil that we had to live with in order to get the major benefits of liberalization. There was the assumed superior ability of the private sector in selecting investments. So short-term optimization was never questioned. And now let me move quickly to the emerging model as we see it, as I see it. Let me start from what is changing, the reasons. A massive investment need for decarbonization. More emphasis on social justice, which leads to affordability, more attention to affordability issues. And a new emphasis on competitiveness of the industrial sector, in the European industrial sector, that also relates to affordability. And finally, the topic of security of supply and independence. Here, allow me two observations. First of all, that the situation now looks much more similar to the one that justified monopolies and public ownership than the one that justified liberalization and regulation. And the second observation that I would like to put forward is that in the current policy debate, we don't find much indication of why the markets cannot work in this environment. We find more statements than explanation and evidence. But that's just an additional comment. Now, on the emerging model, how do we see the emerging model being developed? Well, some items, some elements of the emerging model are placed here. Capacity remuneration mechanisms are or can be implemented to dispatchable technologies. Contracts for differences or PPAs for intermittent renewable generations. Selection of investments based on auctions. We're starting to discuss retail price differentiation among different classes of customers, with industrial customers deserving protection because of in order to keep the European economy industry competitive. And finally, there was a nice statement that national energy and climate plans have to become strategic investment plans, which is not precisely what we would call a market, but that leads me to the interpretation. So we see a lot of focus in the emerging model on de-risking, i.e. investment risk being moved from the investors to the consumers or the taxpayers, and planning. I think the 2025 document by the Commission is the first one in which I see the word planning recurrent, much more recurrent than in the past. And what is the economic mechanism underlying the characterizing the emerging model? Well, basically, public authorities decide the volume of the investments with different nuances. It could be how many megawatts, or also how much to put in which area. There are several variations possible. But the important thing is that the volume is decided by public authorities. And in exchange for investors invest, and investors are selected by tenders. But consumers and taxpayers or taxpayers ultimately bear the risk that those investments might not be the best choice ex post. This is very, very different from what economists regard as a market. It is actually also different from what economists consider and call competition for the market. It is closer to what economists call public procurement, basically. And one of the results, one of the major implications, perhaps the one that sort of says it all, is that investors' income becomes largely independent of what they produce, of electricity prices. It's all capacity-based, and therefore there is less or no risk. Now, let me address in advance an objection that I had to this representation of the emerging model in other discussions. And the objection is your representation is too extreme. It is not like that. There is some risk that remains on investors that requires markets to manage. Well, my reaction to this objection is that, in a sense, it neglects a crucial question. The crucial question is the amount of risk that are keeping with investors the good thing to do? And do we happen to have chosen how much risk we leave on investors because that amount of risk is the proper one, or we are leaving some risk on investors because we need to keep alive all the market apparatus that is meant to reallocate that risk and to do the price discovery? And that I leave with you for discussion. There are some implications. I think I have 2 minutes. Is that correct, Alberto? So I will be very quick. Implications. First of all, the role and the design of the spot markets. In the emerging model, the decision on how much capacity to build becomes basically planned. For most assets, the income to the investors is independent of spot prices. Cost-based bidding, according to some interpretations, can be enforced by a remit. So in that context, one could question whether the current huge short-term market architecture that we have created in the different context when price discovery was central to investment decisions, is it still the best way to go? And also, the approach that we built all based on trading, the so-called decentralized dispatch approach, is it better than the alternative approach, the centralized dispatch approach, once that the price discovery function becomes relatively less important? Now, second set of implications are on the role and the scope of trading. Let me recall the two main benefits of trading: price discovery. And why do we need price discovery? For two reasons. So select the optimal investments, which is a bit less of a problem in the emerging model. And the second reason is optimal dispatch. You need shorter trading to make sure that the right units are activated. And the other role of trading is to reallocate risk. Now, in the emerging model, the value of the investment is assessed not based on spot electricity prices, but at the planning stage. Most of the risk is sort of by design moved on consumers. And prices are somehow less critical for dispatch because all the units have more or less the same marginal cost. So the role of trading appears to need some further thinking, because it's less clear what trading is there for. Now, the quicker I have to go, the more I become brutal in my assessments. Apologies for that. That's the idea. Finally, competition in retail. Again, benefits of retail competition. The benefits of retail competition were seen in differentiation of the offers, but the main source of differentiation was on the risk allocation between consumers and suppliers. And this changes in the emerging model. The risk allocation between the investors and the consumers is decided by design. So there's not much reallocation of risk to be made by the market. So again, the role of competition in retail would deserve being reassessed. Perhaps there is a different role. And now my conclusion. There is no conclusion here. It is just a question. Is it a transitory situation? Do we see the situation of overlapping market institutions and planning institutions as temporary until the end of the transition? Or is it something that we want to live with, or we expect to live with for the rest of the time? I think providing an answer to this question is really important. It is really important for several reasons. So first of all, because it helps investors to understand the direction, the long-term direction, and also it helps policymakers to assess whether keeping all we are keeping, I mean, the entire market apparatus to which we overlap a planning apparatus, is the way to go, or is it just something that will stay here until we reorganize the sector? Sorry for having rushed through the presentation. Thank you very much for your attention. All these things, not all these things you will find in the book, because part of that is happening now, but some ideas are there.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Guido, this was great. Also, the few minutes of tolerance we had, I think, were extremely well placed. Not only because you're providing, well, you're supposed to provide the main food for thought, and I think you really did. So I really look forward also to the next presentations and to the reactions later on in the panel. Thank you so much for also guiding us, making an excursus of the recent history of the electricity market. So let's see now, let's move towards Anna Maria Marchi and her perspective from the Commission. We heard planning, we heard transitory, so you are in a way also supposed to provide some at least partial answers to Guido's provocations. Anna Maria, please.
Yes, thank you very much, Ilaria. I'm very happy to be here with all of you today, and I would like also to thank Guido for this very thought-provoking presentation. I think from my side, I would like to bring in some considerations that maybe he did not mention in his presentation and that are behind the reform that we undertook 2 years ago. We can move to the next slide. But basically, as you know, this reform is an integral part of the EU response to the crisis, which, as we know, has got as a root cause a shock in gas prices, which translated into also very high prices of electricity. So, and why is that? Because gas-fired power plants are still the margin-setting technology in many hours across the EU. So, what is the objective of the reform is really to reduce the influence of gas prices on electricity prices. And how do we want to do it? By bringing let's say the bills that consumers pay closer to the cost of a system in which renewables and non-fossil sources play an increasingly important role, but also by fostering investments in these technologies by providing long-term price signal. I'm not sure, as Guido said, that we are at the start of a new era, but it's true there have been some, let's say, changes compared to the maybe philosophy that underpin the clean energy package. And but at the same time, while really the reform promotes these two objectives, it also strives to preserve the well-functioning of markets, of short-term markets in particular, because they are the most they are those that provide the most efficient dispatching signals, that ensure competition, that ensure that our resources are used efficiently, and also that green technology are dispatched first. What I didn't, and as Guido mentioned, I think this I agree with you, there is also maybe a consideration of kind of more security of supply. I think this reform also follows the REPowerEU strategy of the EU. So we're trying to promote investments in not only on those technologies that are not influenced by the price of gas, but that they are really homegrown. So and those that we have in Europe are also of course in line with our decarbonization objective, are renewables and non-fossil flexibility. We can move on. Yeah, sorry, I didn't mention this point in the beginning, but of course, and I will not focus on this during the presentation because it's not the main topic for today, but of course, consumers are at the core of the reform, and the whole reform is geared towards really bettering consumer protection and ensuring them more affordable prices. We can move on. Just very quickly, I've been asked really to present the main novelties introduced by the reform. As I said, one of the main objectives is really to provide signal for investments, especially in renewable, low carbon technologies and flexibility. And what we realize is that while our short-term markets have become very integrated and work seamlessly, although I mean they can still be improved, and we have proposed also reforms to the short-term market. This has been basically the focus, our main focus for the last decade or so, and there was a need to complement short-term markets by long-term markets. The reform contains three instruments that were already mentioned by Guido: the power purchase agreement, two-way contract for difference, and forward markets. We have tried really to cover all like a series of instruments that then could provide longer-term signal, but over different time frame. And also that cover both like bilateral negotiations, like PPAs, contracts between the state and power producers, and also organized markets, such as forward markets. So in concrete terms, what the reform brings is an obligation for member states to promote the use of power purchase agreements, to make sure that in the member states instruments are available to cover the default risk of the off-taker of the PPA. And when such instruments are not available, member states shall also offer state guarantees at market prices. As regards two-way contract for difference, there is now an obligation for member states to use these instruments when they decide to grant public support to new investment in a number of renewable technologies and in nuclear energy. Because as you know, while these instruments provide a stable, let's say, guarantee, revenues to the producer, at the same time they ensure that when prices are very high, then the revenues, they generate revenues that can be channeled back to consumers. At the same time, it's important to note that the reform also contains a very detailed design principle of contract for difference in order to ensure really to preserve the efficient functioning of markets. And we will be also soon issuing guidance on such design principles. And finally, when it comes to forward markets, I think our analysis shows that they are, in most member states, very liquid or almost inexistent. And therefore, there was really a need to improve this market. The Commission, I think, came forward with a very ambitious proposal, which was not accepted by the co-legislator. So now we are carrying out an impact assessment on how to improve such markets, and then we will eventually make new proposals, which can also come in tertiary legislation. Can we move to the next slide? And finally, from this slide, what I want to mention is, as Guido also was mentioning, there is the reform also introduces for the first time the possibility for member state to support specifically non-fossil capacity. So, for instance, demand response and storage, based on a need assessment, which should be in line with a pan-European methodology to be developed by ACER. Just maybe we can move to the next slide. Here you have an overview of the work that we're doing now on the implementation, and I'm happy really to go back to that. But what I wanted to say, just also as a reply to what Guido said, that I think indeed there is this reform is also an acknowledgement that our short-term markets needed to be completed with longer-term signal. I don't fully agree that this takes away all, kind of incentives, like that the state then will decide how much and where and how to invest. I think the investment, the magnitude of the investment that we have to carry out is such that the role of private investors will be crucial. But at the same time, there is an acknowledgement that the very high volatility of short-term markets, which can be influenced by factors that we cannot control, as the war has shown, needed really to be complemented by other longer-term signals. Thank you.
Many thanks, Anna Maria, and yes, also for already stating very clearly your position regarding some of the questions that are starting to emerge. So thank you very much. I think I can only go next and listen now to the point of view of regulators with Christophe Genskreux from ACER. Please.
Thank you, Ilaria, and thank you for the invitation, and congratulations, Guido, for the book, and also to your co-author. I will try to be brief. I will just recap that the big challenges ahead of us, but I'm sure you're already aware, Alberto and Guido already mentioned them. So we have a few clear targets. The sustainability target first, with clear decarbonization objective, which will require huge investment in renewable and infrastructure. We have the security of supply target, here also with relatively clear objectives. And we notice very recently that load shedding and blackout are not very popular, so we really have to be careful with that. But there are two other objectives, two other targets, which are maybe a bit more unclear and which concern the redistribution. They were already mentioned by Guido, the competitiveness of the European economy and the affordability for European consumers. I emphasize these two last targets because they are about redistribution, and they are gaining more and more importance in the political arena, and the action plan published by the European Commission. So which target model to address these big challenges? What is the role of the market versus the role for public intervention? A pure economist, and I used to be such a pure economist, a pure economist would answer that we should not care too much about this redistributive aspect. We should focus on a target model which is able to achieve the highest social welfare, and maybe leave all this redistribution consideration to politicians. Unfortunately, after more than 20 years in the electricity sector, I've lost a bit my purity, and I know that the electricity sector is very complex, unique. There is no silver bullet solution, and we need to navigate between these sometimes contradicting objective and find the right balance between the theory and the practice. So most likely, to answer your question, Guido, I think that during this transition, we will need to combine these two approaches. So first, the market. Why we really need the market? Because whether we like it or not, and market still remain the most effective way. They are much more effective than governments in running a business. Also, and maybe to go a step further, because also this without this short-term market, without a fully integrated market, we will never be able to reach all these ambitious targets, the sustainability, the security of supply one. And also, this was mentioned in your slide, Guido, because public budgets are as troubled, if not more, than 10 or 20 years ago. And finally, because we know that the market delivers each year major benefits, including during the crisis, just to mention some 3 examples which were in the final assessment of the EU wholesale electricity market design that ACER published during the crisis in 2022. So the first example is the welfare gains from market coupling at EU level, 34 billion euro each year. The price volatility during the crisis would have been 7 times higher if the market had been isolated. I think you should keep this figure in mind to highlight the importance of having a market. And another very important example is the contribution of the market, of the interconnected market in terms of security of supply, and maybe give the example of the French example in 2022 during the nuclear power outages, where France become, we used to be a big net importer, became suddenly a huge net exporter with a swing in terms of position of the equivalent of 56 terawatt, which is the equivalent of the total demand for a country like Belgium. So we need to strengthen this market design, and we already put a lot of components on the table for what we call an EU target model 2.0. Just to mention a few: the hubs and flow-based allocation for the forward market, the 15 MTU and the co-optimization for the day-ahead market, the 15 MTU also, and the flow-based allocation and capacity and calculation for the intraday time frame, plus the bidding zone review, the 70%, the proposal to move toward a single MCO entity to operate the market coupling, our recommendation to improve the grid connection network code, our recent proposal to adopt a network code on demand response, plus the no regret measure to unlock the flexibility in the market. So many things on the table that we need to implement as soon as possible. But of course, we see that there is a tendency to have more and more public intervention, but we need this kind of public intervention. First of all, to define this clearly this policy target and the level of ambition behind. We also need some political intervention to address potential market failures or to mitigate some externalities, but also to address some politically sensitive issues such as the extreme and sustained price peaks that we observed during the energy crisis. When defining this public intervention, there are three key requirements that we need to take into account. And here I see a huge responsibility for member states, but also a strong role for the European Commission to provide guidance. So these three requirements, the first one is to be coordinated, at least at regional level, if not at European level. Whether we like it or not, we are more and more interconnected, we are more and more integrated, and we more depend on each other. So this is a fact that we need to keep in mind that a member state needs to keep in mind when designing a CRM or a contract for defense, or when planning its infrastructure network development plan. The second requirement is to be proportionate and to keep the efficiency first principle as a key principle. It's not because affordability redistribution is gaining more and more importance that you should not keep on exposing generators and consumers to some minimum price volatility. This exposure to price volatility is essential if you want to give the right incentive and make sure that the stakeholders will take the right decision. As a reminder, the public budgets are troubled, and the cost of capacity mechanism amounted to 7.4 billion euros in 2023, which is a 40% rise compared to 2022. So we have to be careful. And the last requirement is to policymakers and to the European Commission is that this public intervention needs to be effective. And maybe this is my last message. We need to put in place the appropriate governance and regulatory framework to deliver all these ambitious objective policy targets, and also to speed up the implementation of key methodology, for instance, through a more credible enforcement framework able to reduce the numerous implementation delay that we have observed in the past. I understand, and Anna Maria could confirm, I understand that the idea of addressing this governance and regulatory framework to make it more appropriate is in the European Commission's intention with this forthcoming white paper on deeper electricity market integration. And if this is the case, I welcome this initiative a lot, and we will follow it very, very closely. Thank you again for this invitation.
Thank you very much, Christophe. Fascinating intervention so far, I have to say. So now we will open the second part of this online event, and I will leave you in the safe hands of Alberto. Just let me note that the Q&A box is just like here under our speaking heads. I see already one question specific to Anna Maria that maybe we can take later. Please don't use the chat box. I think it's not even possible, but please use the Q&A for potential questions to the speakers. And thank you very much to all the speakers so far. Thank you. Alberto, you have the floor.
Thank you, Ilaria. Thank you to Guido, to Anna Maria, to Christophe. I think very interesting presentations. And now we have a roundtable of 3 representatives from the industry. We have Andreas Tires, who is an energy expert from IFIEC, the National Federation of Energy Intensive Industry. Javier Barrantes Seganya, he's the Market Design and Renewable Energy Sources Working Group co-convener at ENSOE, so the grids. And then Killian O'Donnell, Director of Policy at Eurelectric. So we have the 3 elements of the electricity sector represented, and I would urge each of them to stay in their initial statement within 5 minutes so that we will have the pause and more opportunity to discuss. So Andreas, the screen is yours. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alberto. Thank you for inviting me. So I will quickly comment on, in more general terms. So for the energy intensive industry, competitiveness is key, is very important. And for that, we should look at the total system costs. And they should be as low as possible. If this is not low enough to be competitive with other countries, other measures are needed, of course, but then these measures, these additional support measures are less needed if we have obtained the lowest total system costs. And also for the industry, markets are a powerful instrument to get to these lowest total system costs. But we know that markets are not everywhere. For example, the TSO activities, building offshore interconnections are not auction-based. It's mostly, or at least in Belgium and for example, the Netherlands, Germany, it's the TSO that has the monopoly to do this, which can lead to higher costs than if it would have been done through competition. I can only refer, for example, to what has happened in Belgium to connect 3.5 gigawatts of offshore wind. That was an initial cost of 2.2 billion in, I think, 4 years ago, and then now it's estimated at 7 to 8 billion euros. So this could also, of course, happen when there is competition, but generally we believe with competition it would be less costly. So markets are not everywhere, and we also know that markets are not perfect. There are market failures, and for the total system costs, 2 important market failures I would like to highlight is externalities. So especially for wind and solar, you have externalities. So that means that the generator or the investor in solar and wind does not have to bear these costs, like, for example, connection costs or system balancing costs, including what we know now is inertia, and also the backup costs. I think we still are underestimating the impact of Dunkelflautes. The costs of net zero backup is huge, and it will be paid by the system. It will not be paid by investors in wind and solar. And it will be paid by the system. It means that eventually it will also be paid by the industry. So for us, it's very important that these externalities are also taken into account if you go for an optimal energy mix. Another market failure is the mismatch in the time horizon. So private investors, they look at the next 10, 15 years, whereas society looks at this generation, but also the next generations, especially in climate change policy. And there you see that investors are using a much higher discount rate, 7-8% in real terms, whereas the social discount rate that Acer has decided on is more like 4%. So this de-risking is not just like a subsidy, it's more that you give, that you are solving a market failure, that investors have a much shorter time horizon. So de-risking should be viewed as something important for wind, solar, and also for nuclear capacity. I don't know if I have still some time. So maybe then just
maybe 1 minute.
Yeah, 1 minute, okay. So if you look at PPAs and contract for difference, for example, the two-sided ones, they don't take into account, for example, the externalities. That is something that should be known. It's okay to have auction based on this, but to calculate the total system cost, of course, other costs should be taken into account. And also the future of PPAs that will be signed by the industry, given the cannibalization effects that we see for wind and especially for solar. Even if you would add some batteries, I think this could be difficult for industry to sign PPAs on wind and solar 24/7. Green PPAs, they don't exist yet because it's too expensive with the net zero backup that you need. So I think this cannibalization effect is also something that is important and seems sometimes to be underestimated in the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Andreas. Just for the future intervention, I think your audio is a bit unstable. Sometimes it's clear and other times it becomes a bit distant, but maybe you want to check that one. Thanks a lot. The next one is Javier from NSOE. Javier, your opening statement. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the invitation. Also, congratulations to the authors of the book. I had the opportunity to read some abstracts of chapter 1 and preface, and yeah, it looks really interesting. Very happy that I only have 5 minutes because many things have already been said. What we would say as TSO, you know, TSO core mission is ensuring system security. So for that, we think that the progress that we have made so far in integrating the short-term markets in the creation of the internal electricity market has been a key contributor, and that has been also showed how robust this market in the short term is during the last energy price crisis. So yeah, we defend the market-driven dispatch as it helps ensuring security and efficiency. What has been the lesson learned also during the energy price crisis was that there were some weakness in the long-term horizon, and hence this, in our view, this recent market design reform that we also should have a look at. Following also with those words bearing in mind that there are huge investment needed, so there is also long-term investment signals needed, and for that the recent reform provides different tools, CfDs, capacity mechanisms, support the scheme for non-fossil flexibility, also the mandate to further develop PPAs, and in all these aspects from TSO side, what is our concern is that these public this kind of measures and public interventions they should be made in a very measured way, ensuring that there is no distortions in the functioning of the short-term market in the end. So if I'm not going to go one by one, but in NSOE we have done some work regarding CfDs and capacity mechanisms. These are two very big tools that can contribute a lot for renewable development and for adequacy, but also depending how we implement them, they can also affect short-term markets. So we have published a couple of papers on them thinking about this, and we touch many of the points put forward by Christophe and also by Ana Maria and with also regarding the cost redistribution. And also in this long-term horizon and these efforts that are being made to further improve it, and also making reference to Ana Maria's presentation when she was referring to this forward capacity market improvement and assessment. Maybe one thought from TSO's perspective. Seems there are some expectations on increasing, negotiation timeframe in the long-term auctions of capacity, even if it is financial. It should be bear in mind that there is no practical or technical or reliable way of really offering a meaningful capacity or a reliable capacity in too long time frames. And even if it is only financial, so at least if it's only financial, of course, there is no system security risk, that is for sure. But even if it is financial, there is this cost redistribution aspect that has to be carefully taken into account, as we could be risking transferring the risk to end consumers via transmission tariff. Yeah, I'm happy to balance the time available for the rest of the speakers now.
Thank you very much, Javier. Thank you also for raising a point that we will touch during the pause. So Kilian, your last intervention or last intervention in this roundtable, your opening statement, please.
Thank you, Alberto. Just checking, you hear me okay?
Yes.
Very good. So good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Kilian Dunnu. I'm the policy director at Eurelectric. Similar to Javier, I'm in the unfortunate position of kind of coming late in the schedule. So there's some things I've said have already been said, but I'll try to keep it to minimum. I'm going to focus on two main things. Just give our perspective as Eurelectric of what the sweet spot is between markets and public intervention. That's more kind of philosophical approach. And secondly, quite specific on the current market design, what we think of it and where we think we should be focusing our efforts. So if I can just go to the next slide, please. So I've kind of three key messages for today. So firstly, yes, markets are optimal. They're the best, most efficient way to distribute resources. I think that was quite clear. I've seen Guido's presentation. He kind of makes out it stops in 2024, that thinking. But as Eurelectric, we're very clear. We think markets are the best approach. And if you look back to the energy crisis and where we looked at the current market design, we did an impact assessment. The consensus was quite clear. We have very good, very efficient short-term markets in Europe. What we see, though, is that there was a need to further develop long-term contracting and unlock the potential of flexibility. And the Commission did the correct thing. They focused on those two aspects in the market design reform. Secondly, however, of course, there is a role for public intervention in guiding investments. That's quite important. And just a few basic examples here. So renewables deployment, obviously CfDs, two-sided CfDs are going to have an important role in de-risking long-term investments. Secure supply is essential, and capacity mechanisms are a permanent part of the market design now. And I think they will be quite essential. And even we do see issues with PPAs. Some of the off-takers, their credit risk is just too high. And we do see a role for organizations like the EIB to act as credit guarantors of PPAs. So that's some examples where public intervention is necessary. However, we have to hit the sweet spot, and too much public intervention will be counterproductive to the transition. First example, and something we're very clear on, is price caps kill investment cases. I don't want to isolate member states, but what we've seen in Spain, that is not good for investment, and also some of it is in the end a subsidy for gas power plants. We don't think that is an optimal approach. Similarly, certain member states which have regulated prices in place, that kills the incentives for flexibility. If you have certain social policy objectives, you do them via social policy, but you don't kill the market. And I think we have a very clear position on that. Elsewhere, I would just say throughout the whole transition, in all circumstances, there are a few kind of no-brainers or things you must do. The first is we should lower taxes on electricity. We need to electrify society, and we need to keep system costs under control. Today, we're focusing more on the market design, but the Commission had the Affordable Energy Action Plan out a couple of months ago. We thought it was a very good document because it focused a lot on those things. If I go to the next slide, please. So going forward, where should we focus our attention? We think the short-term focus, why maybe it's not that sexy, should be on implementation. We have spent 18 months doing a market design reform, and now it's about implementing a lot of very technical, important things. So as Eurelectric, we have specific working groups and task force set up on all these aspects. So standardization of PPAs, CfD design, the flexibility needs assessment, peak shaving tools. I could also add the network code. We are looking into all those aspects, and that should be the focus for now, for the next 18 months, 2 years. In the medium term, a broad discussion should start on how we limit systems costs in the transition and what governance we want to have. The Commission will begin work on a white paper and it should be launched in mid-2026. We welcome that discussion, but that's more for the medium-term thinking. So that's kind of where we see focus should be. If I just go to the next slide, I have two more. So where markets perform well, I think I've already covered. I think margin pricing is an extremely efficient system. It's the cheapest source first. It's very transparent. You see the true cost. It's cost-reflective behavior. It also encourages demand response. So we should keep that in place, and we should unlock flexibility. A more flexible system on the consumer side will be a cheaper system. Two examples, EVs. We did a big study a couple of months ago where we modeled having 30 million EVs on the road. That is 114 terawatt hours of flexibility potentially. Similarly, industry with demand response, they can really reduce their bills. We had a meeting with the Finnish industry, and what we see, if you avoid the top 10% of hours, you get €30 a megawatt hour electricity price. So industry being flexible, the car industry being flexible, they will lower costs overall. And the last point I've already mentioned, price caps, regulated prices should be discouraged. I've just one last slide. And this is kind of where public support can complement and provide long-term visibility. First is obviously renewables deployments. CfDs will have an important role to play here. Given the volatility, sometimes it's difficult to get the finance. The risk is too big. So CfD is important here. Obviously, CfDs should not crowd out PPAs. We need to find the correct balance there, and the devil's in the detail. As I mentioned before, we welcome the greater role for the EIB, particularly in the off-takers, de-risking the credit of the off-taker. Capacity mechanisms are now a structural component of market design. That is a good thing. And finally, we welcome, and we think actually we probably need more work to be done on planning. We have a lot of systems in place, but they need to be integrated and improved. And last thing I would say is, the governance of the internal energy market is going to be a big discussion. And we should probably look at if we need to enforce or have more enforcement powers. We all know the rules. We all know they're not going to be achieved, the 70% target, etc. The Draghi report is quite clear. And I think even the comments from the Acer representative earlier was quite clear. The internal market is a good thing. It lowers cost overall. During the energy crisis, it led to 7 times less cost if we compare it to if we'd gone it as just a member state. So we probably need to look at having stronger governance of the internal energy market. I'll stop there now. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Killian. Thanks a lot also for raising a number of other issues which were not touched upon until now. Thank you very much. That completes the first round. And now we ask our audience to contribute to this event by answering 3 questions. Panelists and speakers are not allowed to vote. And the first one has to do with the interaction between the new market design and the efficiency of the market. The question is, last year's revision of the electricity market design assigns a greater role to competition for the market, or as Guido says, procurement, based on long-term contracts such as PPAs and CfDs, as opposed to competition in the market. In your views, could this negatively impact the efficiency of the electricity market? You can think that yes, it does, as long-term contracts will reduce the role of short-term market and trading in determining resource dispatching. It depends on how long-term contracts are designed, or you can think of no, as there will still be a liquid short-term market, or you can also not have a specific view. So please vote, and we will see the results in a few seconds. Right, so generally we are quite optimistic, but clearly depends on how these contracts will be designed. So thank you very much. Now, speakers and panelists take note of this feedback. The second one is on, more specifically on power purchase agreement. What is, in your views, the greatest challenge in extending the use of power purchase agreement in the electricity sectors? Because actually these agreements are not, which are supposed, as we said, to be part of the main part of the design, seems to be slow to start. First option is the mismatch between the contractual time horizons for sellers and buyers. The need to provide guarantees over a longer time frame the current lack of investment hedging instrument hedging the variability of the cross-zonal price differentials over a time frame longer than 1 year, or other aspects, or you don't have views on this? Right, so there seems to be different views, a bit on the horizons, a bit on the guarantees, a bit less on the need to have longer term financial transmission rights, just to call them by their names. The final question is, in your views, would some degree of standardization of power purchase agreement would help in extending their role? First option is yes, it may facilitate the development of a secondary market for PPA. Yes, as it might reduce the guarantee requirements for PPA, or no, as it would limit the customization of PPAs, which is one of their essential features, or you can also have no views. Right, so guarantees don't seem to be much of an issue. I think our audience is a bit split. On the one hand, they see the role of the secondary market, but there is also the risk of losing the customization, which is an essential feature of PPAs. Okay, so there is a trade-off clearly here. Okay, so thank you very much to everybody who participated in this answering these questions. I think we can start with reacting to these questions, and I would start in reverse order, because then there seems to be also questions for Anna Maria, Christoph, and Guido. So, Kilian, what do you make of the answers from the audience?
Thanks very much. So I'll respond from my side, get my perspective. On the first one, I just don't see it as a binary equation. I think we need to do both. I think it's obvious we haven't discussed much forward markets, but I think we need to develop better, more liquid forward markets. The focus now is on virtual trading hubs. We don't think they're the optimal instrument. We think there's other things we can do, but it's important to have more liquid forward markets. And also, as I mentioned earlier, we also need to develop long-term contracting, but that is not a binary equation. We can still further focus on completion of internal energy market, which is something we very much support. So that's what I say on the first. On the second, on PPAs, I would actually have a different opinion of the biggest obstacle. What we see a huge obstacle in this whole thing is just grid connection requests and the amount of time it takes. So we have a lot of customers coming to us, particularly in Southern Europe, to be transparent, particularly data centers. They're saying, I have this demand, it's real, I want to connect, I want to set this up. But this is taking 5 to 7 years, and these are global companies. And they're like, okay, if it's 7 years, then maybe I don't want to do this PPA, maybe I don't want to locate in Europe. So speeding up grid connection requests, we think, is something which will help an awful lot. And then on the third one, on standardization, it depends. I think it's good to have some standardization, particularly for the smaller guys, because they often don't have such big teams of people who are involved in procurement. But myself, I used to work for industry. I used to work for aluminium industry. So you have big, huge teams of people who are responsible for procurement. And for these kind of contracts, I think it's not standardization. There's still going to be bespoke contracts. And I think that's important given their needs. Last thing I would just say is there's a bit of a discussion developing in Brussels where certain industries are saying, I'm a big, large baseload consumer and I want to be outside the market. Give me a CfD plus. And I don't think that's a good thing. I think that will kill the market. So I think that's something we need to avoid. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Kilian. I'm sure Andreas would have the view, but first, Javier.
Yeah, thank you very much. Very, very good questions, and it was very interesting to see the reaction in real time. For the first one, yeah, that would have been also be my answer. I mean, yeah, it is how long-term time frame may affect short-term. It is something that also can worry us because, as I said before, short-term markets are key for system security and efficiency. And indeed, it depends a lot on how this is developed and implemented. It will affect greater or in a lesser extent to short term. So yeah, fully aligned with that. With the second question, I was happy to see that it fell in third position, the financial transmission rights in longer time frame, because indeed this is also something that worries us, and also it somehow confirmed the feeling that some of us had following different consultations and so on, that this doesn't seem to be the most limiting aspect for cross-zonal PPA development. And also happy that there are no big expectations or requests there, because we think there is not much that we can provide with in that aspect in security conditions or affordable conditions regarding the end consumer. For the last one, I take note of that, but honestly, I don't feel very well placed to have a view on whether standardization of PPAs is needed or not. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Javier. Andreas.
Yeah, I hope you can hear me a little better. For the first poll, I think competition for the market instead of on the market is a notion that is normally used for industries or sectors that have big network effects, like social media, like LinkedIn or the Uber app or Microsoft Office, where the value of the product or the service depends highly on how many other users are there using that product or service. You don't have that here with PPA, so I would think it's less of an issue. Also, we know that electricity markets are incomplete. It's difficult to trade for 4 or 5 years ahead. We have in some countries forward markets who are fairly liquid for 2-3 years ahead, but it's more difficult to go any further. So I would think PPAs can close this gap or try to get this gap less important. So I think it's more a positive thing than it would be a negative thing. On the second poll, I would have indicated more like other aspects. Okay, the mismatch of contractual time horizon is important, I think, but other aspects are the cannibalization effects and its impact on the capture rate, especially for solar, but also for wind. So that would mean that there is less appetite to sign these PPAs if there is no support that go with it. And another thing that I said before is that 24/7 net zero electricity, it's very costly to do that on this moment and probably also in the future to provide for or to supply 24/7 net zero electricity coming from batteries, solar and wind, because of those Dunkelflautes and because of the very expensive net zero backup that you need for that. So I think these two aspects are more important. And on the third thing, I also don't have a strong opinion. We would say no mandates, not something that is imposed, but maybe a non-mandatory example, yeah, that can help. But no strong opinion on the third question.
Thank you very much, Andreas. And now we come to Christoph, Anna Maria, and Guido. And there are one question for each of you in the Q&A from the audience. For Christoph is, when will the white paper that you mentioned be published? Who is publishing it? But Christoph, you are always obviously also welcome and mostly to comment on the results of the polls.
Okay, very quickly on the polls. For the first poll, for me, it depends a lot on how long-term contracts are designed. And this is why in my opening statement, I invited the European Commission, but I think this is in their plan to provide guidance to member states in particular, how to design a contract for differences. To the second poll, for me, the mismatch between the contractual time horizon of sellers and buyers is the key challenge. And the third poll, I would have answered no, as it will limit the customization of PPAs, which is one of their essential features. We already have standardized product in futures, and I'm not sure we need to develop standardized PPAs. Maybe what we need more than standardization is maybe to make an educational or pedagogical effort to explain this PPA contract in particular to the small customers, to help them, but I'm not sure we need standardized contract. Regarding the white paper, actually the question should go to Anna Maria, I think, because they will hold the pen.
Okay, so Anna Maria, you hold the pen, and there is also a specific question for you regarding peak shaving products. You didn't mention that. Is that because you don't see them as a main pillar of the reform? But please also comment on anything else that you've heard so far.
Thank you, Alberto. So no, I didn't mention the peak shaving product because I mean there are really many aspects to this reform, and in the interest of time it was not possible to touch upon all of them. But the peak shaving product is also, for instance, now mentioned again also in the action plan on affordable energy. So it is something that we value, especially what we call there in this action plan on member states to kind of to start thinking of how to start like putting in place this product for that can be then activated in time of crisis, but also in times of let's say for instance peaks like the ones that we saw last summer in in southeastern Europe. So yeah, it's certainly something that we value. When it comes to the white paper, I think also this was announced in the action plan on affordable energy, as also Christophe mentioned. It is meant really to launch a reflection, a broad reflection among all stakeholders, institutions, etc., on how the future market design should look like. How can we deepen market integration, and as Christophe mentioned, a big focus will be on the governance of the internal energy market. On the polls, maybe I'll just comment on the first question because for us it is extremely important. It is true that the reform promotes the uptakes of PPAs and even mandates the two-way contract for difference in some instances. But for us, the design is key. I mean, this shouldn't come at the detriment of the functioning of the market. And to that end, we plan to issue guidance both on PPAs and on CfD design. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anna Maria. Finally, Guido, any thought of what you've heard or seen, and also. There is Monica Morawiecka checking that you only mentioned two functions of markets to guide investment and efficient dispatch generation, but she asked, and what about demand? Because demand side flexibility is clearly also a major part of the future. Guido.
Yes, first of all, on the polls, just two quick comments. The first of all, on the negative or potentially negative interaction between long-term contracts and spot markets functioning, I just want to say that I agree with Christophe. I don't think the duration is the variable that determines the trade-off. If anything, there can be negative interactions depending on the design of the long-term contracts. If you take away the incentives for people to bid in the markets correctly, in the spot markets, because of the long-term contract, then you might have issues in the remaining function of the spot markets, which is ensuring the optimal dispatch. So that's on the first one. Second comment on the PPAs. Well, I just I just wanted to point out that a mismatch between demand and supply would mean that consumers don't want to have long-term contracts. So I think that says a lot about the importance of public intervention, because if consumers don't want it, but you get them to do it, maybe by paying incentives or just forcing them or finding institutions that do them in their place, but that's a big change. And finally, on demand response, I think Monica is right. Spot prices are very important for demand response. I think we have evidence that so far spot prices have not been enough to induce investments or the volume of investment that we expect and that we wish in demand response. And it is not by chance that support mechanisms for demand response are now being moved towards capacity-based incentives. I'm thinking of France, especially, where they have very advanced incentive schemes. So yes, spot prices are important for demand response. But again, and this is a more general comment that I want to make also to what Christophe says before on the role of spot term markets for cross-border coordination. Here, I don't have in mind a counterfactual to the current situation, but it is not fair to say that without spot markets, efficient cross-border integration is impossible. I'm not just supporting an alternative model. I don't have in mind an alternative model, but I think we should always have in mind a sort of a full-fledged counterfactual. That's it on my side.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Guido. I think we completed this second round of interventions. I don't see other questions, so I will use the privilege of being the moderator to ask for one question, and I would ask all of you to answer in no more than 2 minutes. I know it's almost impossible, because there is one cohort or one constituency which is missing today here, which is the small consumers. And at the end of the day, these are the citizens, and all what we do is supposed to be for the benefit of citizens, well, for consumers, large and small. So we have IFIEC with large consumers, we don't have the small ones. The question is, do we think that the overall, and Anna Maria briefly touched on it, saying this is not in scope today, but maybe we want to put it in scope. Do we think that the tools and instruments we have today are sufficient to make sure that whatever the reform will deliver also get to residential customers and commercial customers? So I would start with, with Anna Maria first, and then I will go with the others.
Yes, thank you, Alberto. I think, this is at least what we have tried to do with the reform. I think what I would like to maybe to highlight there is that this reform aims on the one hand at giving more choices to consumer. I would say I still a bit in this philosophy, in the sense, for instance, because for instance, before there was an obligation just to offer dynamic prices contracts, and now there is an obligation to offer both, so that consumers really can adapt, can choose the instrument that it's best for them, but also to empower them. For instance, we have a lot of measures on energy sharing, on metering, so that they can really interact better with the system.
Thank you very much, Anna Maria. Indeed, I think consumers have a lot of tools. I think, in my view, there is still a question mark whether they know how to use it and whether they bother to use it, which is a bit ironic anyway. Anyone else? I don't know, Christophe or Andreas or Kilian or Javier or Guido. Anyone wants to get into to share their views on this one?
Yeah, please. Like to go, if it's okay?
Yeah,
yes,
please.
My initial remarks were where I put the focus on total system costs. That's the first thing that the industry is asking for. The second thing is if the total system costs are already as low as possible and the industry is still not competitive, okay, then you need additional measures. But the first element, going for the lowest total system cost, is good for industry, but it's good for every consumer, the SMEs and the residential consumers. So I think this is something that is also much viewed by regulators who are also defending all consumers as an important goal. I can only say that also for EFIAC, this is that the total system cost should be considered, because eventually, if it's through taxes or tariffs, it will be paid by consumers or taxpayers who are often just consumers.
Okay, sure. So Killian?
Thanks, Alberto. Yes, so three comments from my side. Firstly, in this whole transition, it's important to distinguish between electricity costs and energy costs. So as more people electrify, their electricity costs might go up, but their overall energy costs go down. I think that's important. People understand that, and it's not well understood. Second point I would make is it's kind of similar to what Anna Maria was saying. We need to empower consumers better. And I think it'd be self-critical. I think as a sector, we need to be better at kind of engaging consumers. We see certain companies, particularly in UK, companies like Octopus Energy, have been very good at showing to consumers the benefits of being engaged in this transition. And I think we can learn a bit from those examples. And the final thing I would say just on the cost is it's important to break it down. We all know this well, 1/3 the energy component, 1/3 the infrastructure component, 1/3 taxes. We spend a huge amount of time discussing the energy component. But we could really make things easier for ourselves if we reduce taxes. You know, in Germany, you pay for your TV license via the electricity bill. There's all these examples. We should probably be looking at that. And then for the infrastructure, what we've seen in terms of the grids is the bill is going to increase from 38 billion a year to 67 billion a year going forward. And we need to have a societal discussion. Do we pay that now? Do we want to maybe find different financial mechanisms for that to happen? That is a bigger discussion, but we can't avoid that. We're going to have to spend more on the grid going forward. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Killian. Any other comments? We are getting towards the end of our time.
Yes. Can I?
Sure, Guido.
Okay. Well, I just wanted to say that the question is very, very appropriate. I think sometimes we like so much discussing about mechanisms and solutions that we forget that the ultimate target is measured by total cost of electricity for consumers or total cost of energy, depending on the situation. And I think Europe has chosen a global model for organizing the electricity sector that is very elegant, highly reliant on competition potentially, but it is also expensive to manage. And I think there are at least three areas that should be monitored. First of all, transaction costs. I'm always said by multiple people that the costs of keeping alive the whole electricity market in Europe is very modest in terms of transaction costs. That's true, possible, but it should be monitored. Another thing is incentive schemes. The more we move towards sort of regulated or publicly determined mechanisms, the more we will have to pay. Economists call them information rents. I mean, all incentive schemes comes at a cost, and that cost should be monitored. I think the UK has a lot to teach us, especially on the networks regulation. Not always a success. And finally, a third area to monitor is competition. I mean, I come from a country where a lot of auctions are carried out, and most of them end up to be non-competitive. They end up at the maximum possible price or at the minimum reservation price. That's not competition, actually. Probably we are not the best, but this is something to monitor. There is a problem of rents moving from consumers somewhere else. And finally, I would also include among the items to monitor competition in the retail industry. Again, I'm told that this is just a little thing, just 50 euros per consumer per annum, in exchange for the beauties of competition in retailing. No problem. I'm a great fan of competition in retailing, but those costs should be monitored because in the end, the total bill is affected by those costs. And I'm not saying that Chinese customers are better off than Italian customers, but at the same time, all those cost items should be monitored to see whether what we are doing is worth doing.
Thank you very much, Guido. And I think we've come to the end of today's event. I think a very interesting discussion, and I would like sincerely to thank Guido, Anna Maria, Christophe, Andreas, Javier, and Kilian. Thank you also to the audience for listening and for submitting a few questions. Thank you to Tomiris on the background, without whom nothing like this would have been possible. Please check on us. There are plenty of events that Florence School of Regulation organizes every week. Ilaria and I would be again on screen in June twice, on the 5th of June, looking at the regulatory regime for interconnectors with third countries. There is now an interest in trying to get renewable energy from third countries. And then again on the 11th of June, on the 18th of June, on competition and flexibility. So stay with us. From myself and from Ilaria, who co-hosted the event with me and who unfortunately had to leave just before the end, thanks a lot, and see you soon on screen or in person. Have a good afternoon.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.